The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
They don't have some of the diversity in other states that we have in Nevada, and that's created some of the problem in getting people vaccinated.
Tonight on Politics Now, Nevada puts up big money for vaccine incentives. We'll tell you who's eligible to get the prizes. Plus,
we could see maybe early, late, mid part of 2022.
Getting pot consumption lounges up and running. The head of Nevada's Cannabis Compliance Board explains regulations that still need to be written and how he sees the state of the industry right now. And giving college athletes the ability to make money. The new Nevada law and testimony to Congress accusing the NCAA of abusive behavior.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. How do you convince everybody to get the coronavirus vaccine? Well, the state of Nevada thinks the solution is cold, hard cash. This week, it announced a raffle with $5 million in prizes, all for getting inoculated. Sasha Loftus has the story.
5 million reasons to get your COVID-19 vaccine.
Vax Nevada Days is a COVID vaccine incentive promotion that will provide $5 million in cash and prizes.
Nevada has joined a list of other states offering incentives for those who get their shots.
That would definitely make people want to come out and get vaccinated.
Some love the idea, while others are choosing to hold off.
I'm just waiting just to see, the developments with the science.
Nevada's vaccination numbers are still lagging behind other states. That's why leaders are kicking things into high gear with Vax Nevada Days.
We need to get shots in arms to protect people as much as possible.
Anyone who's had at least one dose will be entered into a raffle to win cash, education savings plans, state park permits, and fishing licenses. One lucky person will also win a grand prize of $1 million.
Every single Nevadan counts as we work to end this pandemic.
It's an idea many call inventive in the rush to reach herd immunity.
I would have got vaccinated anyway to stay safe and keep my kids and my family safe, but even better if I'm getting something extra for it.
And they believe it will help us inch even closer to community-wide protection. Sasha Loftus, 8 News Now.
Now, the program is funded with federal dollars, not Nevada dollars. The raffle will remain anonymous. We do have more information if you're interested, 8newsnow.com. Nevada is working towards giving tourists and locals more places to smoke pot, places in general. July also marks 4 years of legal recreational marijuana here in Nevada and 1 year of the Cannabis Compliance Board. I spoke with the board's executive director about this industry, and we started by talking about the new pot lounges bill.
So what will happen now is it's not going to happen right away or overnight. There is a significant amount of regulatory work that needs to take place. That'll take place through public meetings and public workshops, through the Cannabis Advisory Commission, that's a sister agency to the Cannabis Compliance Board. We've got to figure out things like air quality and safety and single-use products and ready-to-consume products. And so that'll take a number of months. Through that, we'll design the licensing and application process. And so, if everything goes well and there's no kind of regulatory setbacks, we could see maybe early, late, mid part of 2022, some consumption lounges coming online.
Is it going to be a free-for-all? Is there going to be some sort of a restriction on how many lounges are allowed? What might it look like in the crystal ball here of marijuana lounges?
Sure. So the bill envisions 2 types of consumption lounges. One is a retail attached. So that'd be a consumption lounge attached to a current adult use retail store. While that number is not limited per se in the legislation, it is set up that if each owner can only have 1 consumption lounge. And so if you own multiple dispensaries, you will only be able to open 1 consumption lounge. And that effectively limits the number of retail attached consumption lounges that will come online. There are also things like capacity concerns. I mean, some current retail stores are not built for a consumption lounge. Some may be in a strip mall where they can't build a consumption lounge. And so that'll further limit the initial number, at least on the onset. The second type of lounge envisioned in the bill is an independent lounge. And so that really could be anything. And there's at least an initial cap on that of 20 independent lounges, 10 of which will be held for social equity applicants. And so we'll see a smaller amount at the start. However, the board has the authority in the bill to increase those amounts, certainly on the independent side, as we move forward.
It's been about a year since the CCB started, and it's been interesting to follow how the marijuana industry in Nevada has been shifting, whether it's not only dispensaries, but also with cultivation. What's been some of the bigger challenges for the CCB in the last year with trying to get the marijuana industry in Nevada solidified and running smoothly?
Sure. I mean, well, over the past year, obviously, I mean, we were tasked with creating a state agency from scratch. We also had to pass over, 130 pages of regulations to get this industry started. We completely overhauled the way we oversee cannabis, much more of a gaming control board model and a gaming oversight model, which we did. Throw in a global pandemic into that equation, and what we did during the pandemic and COVID with implementing curbside pickup, expanded delivery options, and virtual vehicle inspections helped keep the industry afloat truly on that side of things throughout COVID. And so, many challenges, but extremely happy with where we're at and what we've done in this first year as the CCB.
With so much money in Las Vegas, what sort of enforcement or concerns does the CCB have with regards to how financially, whether it's dispensaries or now in a year or so pot lounges operate, making sure that the money that they make is legitimate, is being handled legitimately, and isn't being weaved through casinos, or there's nothing sort of illegal going on? Is that part of what CCB would do?
Absolutely, and that's what we look for in our investigations and our enforcement side of things. I mean, large-scale cash transactions are the hallmark of money laundering, right? So if you're in an industry like a cash-based cannabis industry, all transactions are large-based cash transactions. And so it's a big concern for us, and it's what we look out for on a daily basis. Hopefully we see some action at the federal level with Congress. Some of the banking legislation that is out there, it has bipartisan support. If we can get some of that through, that'll obviously certainly help us in the state with our regulation and enforcement.
And that was Tyler KLIMAS with the Cannabis Compliance Board, the executive director. Meanwhile, California's legal marijuana industry is actually struggling. On Monday, the legislature there voted to approve $100 million to basically bail out pot growers and sellers. The money is earmarked to have cannabis cultivators, dispensaries, and manufacturers transition from temporary licenses to permanent ones. The governor of California, his office says 82 of their licensees are still on a temporary basis. Back here in Nevada, Governor GOV.SISOLAK ended up vetoing 4 bills from the legislative session just before that veto deadline. One bill that he vetoed would have created a legislative ethics commission. Governor GOV.SISOLAK says several commissions already tackle ethics. He says he vetoed a housing discrimination law because it would make people ineligible for certain federal housing programs. That bill would have created the bill that would have created tourism improvement districts was also rejected. The governor says its mandate in that law to collect extra tax information would hurt restarting the economy. And finally, a bill to create a state dental committee was vetoed because the governor says it included exemptions of open meeting laws. A measure that did pass the legislature and was signed by the governor could bring about a dozen new schools here to Clark County. 33 other campuses at CCSD would be renovated with this new funding. This week, Governor GOV.SISOLAK toured Del Robinson Middle School near Nelson, Washington. That school's nearly 50 years old. There's peeling paint, nicked tables, aging infrastructure. Well, this overhaul, it's scheduled to take 10 years. The governor, though, wants to fast track it.
These neighborhoods deserve better, and they don't deserve better 8 years or 10 years from now. They deserve better now. I don't want a kid that's in kindergarten to be the first one that's going to be coming into these schools. I want this done quickly. This needs to be prioritized.
CCSD plans to bring forward project proposals on this issue as early as the fall. A gun rights group has filed a lawsuit against Nevada's new ban on ghost guns. The new law outlaws firearms with no serial numbers. Litigation was filed by the Delaware-based Firearms Policy Coalition. It claims the law violates the Second Amendment by being too broad. Proponents of the ban say people who are barred from owning guns were able to get through the make-it-yourself kits, get through the laws. Well, the results from Boulder City and its election are in. Matthew Fox beat Koki Booth for the city council seat down there. You see there 52 to 48% of the vote. Fox owns the Fox Smokehouse Bakery. By a 2-to-1 margin also, voters in Boulder City approved spending $7 million to build a new aquatic center and approved a land sale that'll help pay for part of that. The turnout in the Boulder City election, 34%, and interestingly, 2,200 of the 3,900 votes were by mail, and that's going to be an option for all Nevadans in elections going forward. Next week, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo is scheduled to speak at a Nevada gun rights group meeting. The Nevada Firearms Coalition is essentially Nevada's version of the NRA, and it says Lombardo will address the Second Amendment. Sheriff Lombardo has said before he's running for governor as a Republican. However, he has not held an official kickoff event or put out his platform. Closed, but working on a reopening.
It's sad to see so many trees and the turf and just see it from the car as opposed to being able to enter the space.
Next on Politics Now, the city of Las Vegas's plans and timeline to reopen Huntridge Circle Park.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
This week, a committee chaired by Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto held a hearing over Southern Nevada's largest lands bill ever. Among those who testified, JOCELYN Torres, Senior Field Director for the Conservation Lands Foundation.
Having grown up in Las Vegas, Nevada, the ancestral lands of the Southern Paiute people, you can imagine that there weren't a ton of recreational activities for those of us under 21, that is with the exception of our public lands. I spent countless hours hiking, camping, and soaking in the sun with my family and friends, and annually made the journey north to the Ruby Mountains for a family hunting trip.
So this bill protects 2 million acres of public land in Clark County for conservation and recreation. It also sets aside 65 square miles for affordable housing projects. And critics of this measure say that land's just going to go to big real estate investors. The bill, though, does have bipartisan support, including all of Nevada's delegation in Congress. Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen is proposing a bill aimed at reviving travel and tourism. It's the Tourism Act. It makes infrastructure investments in those industries, tourism. That includes paying for new transportation methods like light rail. The bill passed out of the committee that she chairs. It's now headed to the Senate floor. Huntridge Circle Park near downtown Las Vegas has been closed since 2018. But now the city is talking about what it would take to finally reopen it. Madison Kimbrough was at City Hall this week to learn what neighbors think of the plans.
We need recreation more than ever to help in our restoration and also, most importantly, build our community.
At one point, a staple in the Las Vegas community, Huntridge Circle Park has had its ups and downs. It was built in 1941, but has since been closed the last few years due to public safety concerns. Monday night, city leaders joined residents at City Hall to talk about improvements at the park and a timeline for reopening.
We're looking at an 18 to 24 month process because we're going to have continued meetings that will plan, the architect can offer some renderings, the community can have some input.
Some of the amenities suggested including building a dog park, gym stations, community garden, and a gated fence with an access code. Residents gave their feedback online, many who say they're just eager to get this park up and running again.
We moved to the neighborhood a couple of years ago, and we, have been missing the open space, right? It's sad to see so many trees and the turf and just see it from the car as opposed to being able to enter the space.
I'd like to see now that people are coming back out to associate with each other, it's made and built in a way that people can interact with each other.
Madison Kimbrough, 8 News Now.
There will be several more meetings before the park does reopen, and that is scheduled to reopen in 2023. And not far from Huntridge Circle Park, there is, of course, the Huntridge Theater, and plans to renovate the theater are moving forward. It's been closed since 2004. In the past, it's hosted lots of bands, the Killers, Chili Peppers, etc. Local real estate developer Jay Dapper bought the historic venue earlier this year, and his plan is to renovate it into that over the next 3 years. letting college athletes make money. Coming up next, we'll talk about a new Nevada law aimed at letting university athletes profit off their image and the push to make that a national law as well.
You're watching Politics Now.
Recently, Nevada lawmakers passed a bill to allow college athletes to profit off their image, their name, and their likeness. It kicks in January 1st. Proponents say it's a matter of fairness and that it helps all athletes. The bill also includes a study on the issue. Nevada was the 17th state to pass that law. Now Congress is considering passing similar legislation federally. Other laws for college athletes protect their rights to proper health care. But as Alexander Limon explains, the hearing on experiences of college athletes also detailed abuses and injustices.
College athletes came to Capitol Hill Thursday asking lawmakers to set uniform standards for college athlete compensation.
College sports has become a multi-billion-dollar business that has a financial monopoly over its commodified athletes.
Less than 2% of NCAA athletes go on to play professionally, meaning that the best years for them to monetize their name, image, and likeness is these 4 years.
The NCAA says it's in the process of changing its rules to allow athletes to profit off endorsements. Christina Chenal, a former captain of the UCLA track and field team, told senators the NCAA is riddled with other problems.
These years could have been the best years of my life, but instead they were overshadowed by injustice, trauma, and inequity.
Athletes also said many of them are forced to choose majors that allow them to focus on sports, something that also impacts their financial success later in life. Athletes say too often schools aren't looking out for athletes' interests and ignore cases of sexual assault and the mental and physical health of athletes. Martin McNair's son, Jordan McNair, died from heat stroke suffered during practice.
I can't get out of my mind the athletic trainer on the field that day yelling, if he can't walk, drag his ass across the field.
States like Maryland and California passed new laws to protect athletes, but athletes and even the NCAA say a single set of federal rules would be better. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
9 years ago this week, the DACA program was created. It was intended as a temporary protection for young immigrants who arrived in the U.S. illegally as children. Nevada's had about 13,000 DACA recipients. Our entire congressional delegation supports a bill to make those protections permanent, but Congress is once again struggling to pass that. Democratic Senator Alex Padilla and Republican Senator John Cornyn want to see permanent protections for those dreamers.
DACA was enacted as a stopgap measure. It was never enough, nor intended to be enough.
And in America, we do not hold children responsible for the actions of their parents.
Joining us to talk about the future of the DACA program, Alexander Limon, joining us from Washington, D.C. Alex, there's a new version called the 2021 Dream and Promise Act. How is it different from what's already in place? And talk about the opposition as well.
Well, Congress has been trying to pass versions of the DREAM Act for 20 years now, and those attempts do have bipartisan support. Some Republicans say they support the idea of providing permanent protections for these young immigrants who came to the U.S. illegally as children. However, the 2021 version, Republicans say, just goes too far for their comfort because it also provides protections to other types of undocumented, or actually they're not undocumented, to other types of immigrants, TPS recipients, for example. TPS stands for Temporary Protected Status, and they were given those permits to come to the U.S. You know, sometimes some of them have been here for 20 years as well because of devastating natural disasters in their home countries, things like that. So this year's version of the DREAM Act does include protections for those immigrants as well. And so Republican senators like John Cornyn, who have expressed support for the DREAM Act in the past, say this version won't get through the Senate, but it's worth noting that previous versions that didn't include that didn't get approved by Congress either.
There's a federal court case in Texas still pending. It could have an effect certainly on how DACA moves forward and how this issue is taken up elsewhere around the country. Can you explore a little bit more about what this case is and how it affects national discussions?
Sure. While I mentioned that some Republicans do say that they support DACA recipients and support the idea of giving them permanent protections, other Republicans, both here in Washington, in Congress, and around the country, do not. For example, state legislators in the state of Texas, the Texas Attorney General was joined by 8 other states in bringing this lawsuit 2 or 3 years ago now. It's still in the works, but the lawsuit alleges that DACA recipients and the DACA program have cost these states irreparable damages because these states have had to pay for things like healthcare and education of the DACA recipients, and so they are attempting to strike down and get rid of the DACA program altogether nationwide.
Alex Limon from Washington, D.C. There is no date yet on when we could expect a ruling on that case in Texas. This week in What to Watch, fundraising is really starting to pick up for campaigns. County Commissioner Ross Miller has a fundraiser scheduled at the Cosmopolitan, $5,000 per couple. Now, you'll remember Miller just got elected to the County Commission last year. In fact, it was a Supreme Court hearing in the state Supreme Court to affirm his position on the County Commission that it just was ruled upon. Fundraising is working way ahead of when he is up in 2024. So that is what we are watching for this upcoming week. There's a lot of other potential announcements coming as well, so we'll certainly have that for you right here on Politics Now next week. But for now, we thank you very much for watching. For all the latest political news, head to 8newsnow.com. We're back with you next Saturday. Thanks for watching.